Questions. We're going to move on now to our next item of business, which is a statement by Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop on BIFAB. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, so I would encourage all members who wish to ask a question to press their request to speak buttons, and I call on the Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I welcome the opportunity to address Parliament today on the current position facing BIFAB. This Government has shown real commitment to BIFAB, and we continue to explore all options to secure a future for the energy contract in Scotland. I've been clear throughout this process on our priorities, which have been shared by the majority shareholder JV Driver, to secure the build-out of the energy contract in Scotland and to protect the public interest in terms of financial exposure and the jobs that a successful business might support. These priorities reflect our aspirations for offshore wind supply chain manufacturing in Scotland, and that Scottish companies and the Scottish workforce benefit from the build-out of these projects, creating jobs and boosting our economy, especially in these challenging times. Our support for BIFAB has been significant. £37.4 million was converted to a 32.4% equity stake, and a loan facility of up to £15 million was provided. This financial support ensured that the Beatrice offshore wind farm, the Moray East pin piles and the first E&P contracts were completed, creating over 1,000 jobs across the 3 yards at Arnish, Burnt Island and Methil. As a minority shareholder, we have no role in the business's day-to-day decisions. We work closely and collaboratively with the majority shareholder, JV Driver, and the BIFAB Board of Directors, but ultimately it is for the directors to take all necessary decisions on the operations of the business. I would emphasise at this point that I have been disappointed by JV Driver's lack of financial investment in the business and the zero-risk position it has adopted as majority shareholder. This stance is a key factor in the situation which the business now faces. This Government backed the strong prospects for the offshore wind supply chain in Scotland and BIFAB's potential role in that. BIFAB had a strong pipeline of work opportunities at the start of 2020, with the potential to secure both the LNG and Seagreen contracts. This would have allowed continuous work from 2020 to 2022. The pandemic delayed both the LNG and Seagreen projects, impacting BIFAB's cash flow problems. I'm extremely disappointed that SSE did not award the Seagreen contract to BIFAB. This decision has been pivotal in the situation which BIFAB now faces. The BIFAB bid was competitive with all other UK and European bids. Furthermore, BIFAB's tender included fully procured Scottish steel, offering an opportunity for SSE to demonstrate its support for the Scottish supply chain during these challenging times. The UK policy context also presents challenges. The UK Government's damaging contract for difference rules work against Scotland and the Scottish supply chains, meaning companies like BIFAB have limited chances of securing work. The contracts for difference auction needs to ensure that project bids are not secured purely on the price per megawatt. The UK Government must consider the wider economy and our response to the climate emergency. We very much welcomed EDF's support to BIFAB, carving out the contract for delivery of 8 jackets from within their wider LNG project. This commitment to the development of our Scottish supply chain was a welcome boost, especially as the wider trading circumstances are very difficult. However, the delays to the LNG contract award as a result of the pandemic, SSE's decision to award the Seagreen contract to companies in China and the Middle East, compounded by JV Driver's continued lack of investment in the business, has greatly weakened BIFAB's cash flow and balance sheet. These factors bring about a position whereby the Scottish Government cannot currently legally continue to financially provide more support to BIFAB. I recognise the disappointment felt across the Chamber by the trades unions and the remaining 30 staff currently employed by BIFAB, and I share this disappointment. It is not that the Scottish Government does not want to continue to support BIFAB, it currently cannot. I have shared with parliamentary colleagues with a constituency or regional interest that I met with last week, a follow-up briefing detailing information on the state aid rules which impact BIFAB and Scottish Government support to the business. Ministers are required to operate within the law. No decision taken by ministers can be in contravention of state aid rules or any other legal provision, including international treaties by which Scotland is bound. I have considered all legal options for continued financial support to BIFAB by Scottish Government. My conclusion that Scottish Government can no longer continue to support the business currently is based on a range of facts, including the current position of the business, its trading forecasts, its prospects for future work, and the continued no-risk position of the majority shareholder. For financial support to be legal, it needs to be provided in line with the market economy investor principle, often referred as the MEEP compliance support. The key question in determining whether or not financial support to the business would be possible is whether a market economy investor would do the same. We can only act as a commercial investor would in our situation. If the majority shareholder is not prepared to invest in the business, it is very challenging to demonstrate that another commercial investor would invest. I will address some of the media speculation I have seen. Scotland remains bound by EU state aid law. Choosing not to comply is not an option. The Scotland Act makes that clear. The Ministerial Code makes that clear. And there has been some suggestion I should check with UK ministers that I have got this right. To be clear, compliance of Scottish ministers with state aid law is a matter for Scottish ministers, and there is no role for UK ministers in this. We did, however, seek an urgent meeting with UK ministers to establish what support, if any, it might be within their powers to provide. I met this morning with the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster to discuss the issues facing BIFAB. This was a constructive discussion, and we agreed to form a joint UK and Scottish Government working group to ensure all possible options are explored. As a minority shareholder, we have been exhaustive in our consideration of the options available to us to financially support BIFAB from public funds, and we will continue to explore all options. The UK Government shares our view of the challenges presented by state aid rules, but we will work together to do what we can. In parallel, the Scottish Government continues to work closely with the majority shareholder and others to find a solution to secure delivery of the LNG contract in Scotland. Both I and my officials have been in regular contact with the Board of Directors to explore options to deliver on our shared primary objective, namely the delivery of the LNG in Scotland. On the back of SSE's decision on the Seagreen contract, I met with representatives of the board on the 18th of September. I communicated to them the emerging risk that Scottish Government would not be in a position to continue its financial support to the business. This began a period of close engagement with the board and others to explore options which would still allow for the build-out of the LNG contract. From the point when the majority shareholder confirmed they were content for us to engage with the trades unions with an interest in BIFAB, we have done so actively. We have left no stone unturned in our search for a solution to the challenges faced by the business, and we are committed to working with all parties to deliver the best outcome for Scotland. In doing so, the Scottish Government must act within the law, in particular state aid regulations, and should also act in a way which minimises exposure to the public purse. In the absence of a detailed proposal for the continued operations of the business from the majority shareholder, it is difficult for the Scottish Government to currently establish a legal and financial case for continued support. Dialogue continues with the BIFAB board on a legally compliant solution to secure a future for the company. There remains significant hurdles to be overcome to secure that future. But this government has and will continue to do everything within its devolved powers to support the business. I welcome the engagement of members across the chamber on these important issues, on BIFAB and the wider issues facing the offshore renewable supply chain in Scotland. I recognise the breadth of support there is in the chamber for our objectives for BIFAB and the wider industry, and we remain keen to work with all partners to deliver the best outcomes. Presiding Officer, we will leave no stone unturned. We will explore all options, and we will do so collectively and collaboratively with all key interests. And I would be happy to update Parliament again in due course.
The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement, and I'll allow around 20 minutes for that. It would be helpful if members who wish to ask a question would press the request to speak buttons now, please. And I call Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of her statement. I'm delighted that the Cabinet Secretary has had constructive discussions with the UK Government, and I look forward to seeing progress in that area. But, Deputy Presiding Officer, the SNP keep making and breaking promises on green jobs, with Alex Salmond once saying Scotland would become the Saudi Arabia of renewable energy. In 2010, the SNP government promised 28,000 green jobs by 2020. Well, it is 2020 and they haven't been delivered. The nationalist handling of the BIFAB fiasco is another sad example of the mishandling of Scotland's green economy by the SNP. Former Attorney General Lord Davidson says it is remarkable this SNP government didn't just defer the decision on state aid until after the end of this year. So could the Cabinet Secretary clarify the following 3 points? Does she think Lord Davidson's assessment is wrong, and will she commit to full transparency and release the advice that led to the judgment not to defer the decision on state aid? Why were local training and employment clauses not built into the planning consent? And how much public money this SNP government stands to lose as a result of this fiasco?
Fiona Hislop.
So the member covers a number of areas. We are committed to green jobs for Scotland. It would make it far easier to deliver those jobs for Scotland if the key proposition, the key aspects were held in the hands of the Scottish Government. Not all of them are. So therefore, the contract for difference makes a key difference. It's why under Seagreen, you've got a situation, despite the very good work by the director at BIFAB, despite the proposition that was put forward, that tender could not compete, not by a small margin, but by a large margin with tenders from elsewhere, because it was a race to the bottom in terms of costs. So there's currently a consultation on the contract for difference. And from what the member has said, I'm sure he will join others in trying to make sure that those changes are made by the UK Government. On Lord Davison's advice, which was obviously done with, as acknowledged by him, a paucity of information, there are a number of aspects of that which obviously have been taken without understanding the situation we find ourselves in, not least that the decision by ministers are governed by their legal responsibility as of now. The situation is live and current. It's not at some point in the future. We are a minority shareholder. Therefore, the context of our decision has to be such that another investor in the same situation would apply with that. In relation to the advice, I've made clear that it is not possible under the Scotland Act and also the Ministerial Code, which many opposition members always ensure that ministers adhere to, for us to provide the legal advice that was given to us. We can acknowledge that it exists, but we can't provide it for understandable reasons. And in terms of local training and planning consents, we do not have the legislative powers currently on the planning consents. We do, in terms of the transfer of powers, under the Crown Estate now for future contracts, for example, the ScotWind have the ability to make sure that we have that provision and support for community and local jobs. So when we do have the powers, we will use them.
Claire Baker, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of the statement. What people in Fife want today is no more diversion of blame or finger-pointing. What those workers deserve is a clear solution and an explanation. Why was the decision to withdraw the guarantee taken at this point when EDF had signalled there would be work and were also on the brink of changes to state aid rules? Why has it taken so long to engage with the UK Government when the crunch meeting with DF Barnes took place on the 18th of September? The workers who marched on this Parliament and whose jobs are at risk, the communities that are set to lose out, they all deserve better than what we are hearing today. I am calling on the Scottish Government to make public the legal advice it has received, because the Scottish Government make assertions about state aid that are under question. I'm asking them to publish the minutes of the meeting that took place in September. And I want them to explain what attempts to reach a solution were made before the decision to withdraw the guarantee which has triggered this whole situation, and to act now with urgency to ensure the BIFAB yards, the workers and their communities have a future.
Fiona Hislop.
I appreciate the member's concern, and I will try and go through a number of issues. I have just referred to, in my answer to Maurice Golden, the explanation as to why, as a minister, I'm not able to provide the legal advice that she is talking about. I can refer to the fact it exists, but as I explained, under the Ministerial Code and the Scotland Act, it is not, the relationship between those means that it's not possible for me to release that advice itself. I think the point she makes about the aspect of EDF and SAIPEM being ready to offer the contract is exactly the point at time when the judgment of ministers are made, not at some point after January, when there might be or may not be, we don't know yet. There's still negotiations taking place with the EU in relation to future aspects of level playing field state aid. We don't know what the aspects of the internal market bill will mean. My decisions and the government's decisions are judged whether they're legal or not at the point they're taken, not at some point speculatively in the future. She asks about the situation in relation to discussions with JB Driver. Actually, we warned them of risk in September. We've explored multiple options in relation to third-party investment in terms of more state ownership, for example. A whole variety of different areas we've looked at and scrutinised, because I am determined to make sure that the LNG jobs could come to Scotland, precisely because of that. The other issue she raised is why we not contact the UK government earlier. The situation of the contact and approval for contacting third-party potential investors was with the majority shareholders. Right along since that period, in fact, prior even to September, but certainly from September to very recently, and even as of now, JV Driver, as the majority shareholder, have taken the responsibility to engage others to secure the cash flow, the working capital that they need. We agreed with them that we should contact the UK government. That has happened. We are setting up a joint working group with them to explore all options. But on the issue, even as you mentioned on state aid, the UK government's understanding is the same as ourselves.
We move to the open question, please. I've been a bit lax with the length of answers in the two front bench questions, if that could be borne in mind, please. I'm going to have David Torrance to be followed by Mark Ruskell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The BIFAB yards of Methil and Burntisland both lie within my constituency. It is clear that a lack of capital investment from owners JV Driver has resulted in withdrawal from the LNG contract. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what potential there is for a third-party investment in BIFAB, and how can the Scottish Government assist the company to secure decommissioning work from the North Sea oil industry?
Fiona Hislop.
So, as I previously said, the Scottish Government has been closely working with JV Driver to explore all options to deliver the LNG contract in Scotland. We've encouraged the board to explore options for investment in the business from their own resources and from third-party or other resources. These are choices for the majority shareholder, and I would encourage them to do that all that they can to secure such investment.
Mark Ruskell to be followed by Willie Rennie.
The next round of offshore wind farm development will come with a form of jobs guarantee through the Crown State leasing process, and I hope that the East Coast of Scotland and BIFAB will get a decent share of the jobs that will come from that. But can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if she agrees with me that in order to prepare for those jobs, that the Scottish Government needs to shift from just being a disappointed minority shareholder to a position where it actually has a majority stake in companies like BIFAB and an actual seat on the board that can make strategic decisions that can maximise these opportunities that are just waiting there through the supply chain in the future?
Fiona Hislop.
I think Mark Ruskell makes an important point about how we can ensure we prepare for the situation where we can get more jobs, because the ScotWind leases, which are unfortunately just down the track, but they are coming, does enable that jobs guarantee to take place. And I think, not least because we're going through quite an economic turbulent time in relation to COVID itself, looking at what the role of government equity stakes would be in the future is something we should look at. We should also bear reference that one of the missions of the Scottish National Investment Bank is a green mission and to make sure we're delivering net zero. So there are different options that we can look at in the future. But if you can appreciate, my focus absolutely, as of this minute, is trying to secure the NNG contract.
Willie Rennie, followed by Annabel Ewing.
I'm afraid this statement is just a long list of excuses and is no comfort for the workers at BIFAB, who had ministers not so long ago boasting that they had saved the company. The work is already underway off the Fife Coast. We can see the surveying work for wind farms. So exploring all options at this stage is just too late. So can the Economy Secretary be honest with us? What seriously is she going to do to bring these jobs to Scotland now?
Fiona Hislop.
I think I've been quite clear as to what is required. There's an issue around the financial situation of the company. If that can be resolved in the short term immediately, but also if they can demonstrate a future for the business going forward, it makes it much, much easier for us to provide the support which we want to do financially, but legally, currently, as of now, as of this moment, because he says this is live and current, it's not possible for us to do that. But we are trying, and we are continuous in our exploration of the options. We have been, but we will also continue to do that. And as the the consideration of the DEMI claim is in a couple of weeks' time, does that provide more security potentially? Yes, in the short term, in terms of working capital, but the issue still remains about the future of the business, and that requires a detailed proposition from the company, not unreasonable. Is it doable in time? Potentially, the window is still open with EDF and Saipem. I've spoken to them personally myself to ensure that they understand our commitment and our recognition of their commitment to Scotland. So that is where we are as of this moment, and I continue to make sure that we fight for these jobs if we can get them. So that's live, that's current, and that's now.
Annabel Ewing, followed by Donald Cameron.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the MSP for Cowdenbeath constituency, it is a source of great anger that the BIFAB workers have been let down by SSE, by the majority shareholders refused to step up to the plate, and by the UK Government's contract for difference rules, which work against the Scottish supply chain. Can the Cabinet Secretary nonetheless offer, in these circumstances, evidently beyond her control, any hope for the future of the BIFAB workforce?
Fiona Hislop.
We have the skills, but we need to secure the jobs to ensure that those skills and that skilled workforce has a future and can make sure that we can build that circumstance in Scotland where we can benefit from the opportunities of North Sea wind farms and the energy it can provide. The problems facing the company are complex and they're also cumulative, and that is the issue. I've explained it. It's a combination of a number of factors, but it has put particular financial pressure on that company. And the lack of investment from the majority shareholder is problematic. And I do think that when we're looking at options potentially for the future, what we need to be able to do to unlock not just the developments, obviously, for Buckhaven and in relation to Methil and to Burnt Island, also in Arnish, because there are opportunities there in these yards that are not being realised, and it will not just take a financial plan, the legal position, the assurances and the underwriting. It will also take the investment that will be required to benefit from what will be the type of business that will be needed for that offshore sector in the future. So it is about long-term investment, and that's the challenge we currently have in relation to the position that the majority shareholder is currently taking.
Apologies for my earlier error. It's actually now Alexander Stewart to be followed by Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, in the statement you indicate these priorities reflect the aspiration of offshore wind supply chain manufacturing in Scotland. Yet the Just Transmission Commission have warned that the switch to low-carbon economy could be undermined if the Scottish Government fails to secure manufacturing jobs. Therefore, Cabinet Secretary, are the Commission's findings justified, as that would kickstart the local economy and secure jobs at BIFAB?
Fiona Hislop.
So I have great respect and I think in terms for the just and transition, and I think it's absolutely essential in our move to net zero, and we do need to have the manufacturing jobs. But we are not the board of BIFAB, and we are not the business of BIFAB. We are a minority shareholder. So securing the jobs takes, involves a number of factors. And we have worked particularly in trying to secure the supply chain for some of the big contracts. SSE, we impressed in them the importance of them committing to the supply chain. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. I commend EDF for their situation and their position, and we just have to find a way that we can financially have the security that allows the legal support for the Scottish Government to support those LNG jobs.
Rhoda Grant, followed by Alistair Allen.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary is aware that the Council and community in the Western Isles want to decouple Arnish from BIFAB because of the failure to provide any work there. The terms of the lease of Arnish stipulates the care and maintenance of the publicly owned infrastructure there. BIFAB and therefore the Scottish Government are now in breach of that clause because they've paid off the care and maintenance staff. Will they now give up the lease and allow the community to bid for work in their own right and bring work to the islands?
Fiona Hislop.
The member makes an important point, and it was raised on the meeting that I held with MSPs and MPs and indeed council leaders from the relevant council areas. That may be an option if the BIFAB as the company so choose to go down that route. The leaseholder is clearly Highlands and Islands Enterprise. I think that the lease deserves careful examination to identify if there's an opportunity. If BIFAB are not using Arnish, it can be used by others, because we know there's a desire for use of the yards by others that are not obviously part of the BIFAB situation as it is just now. We are not the business. I will reiterate that. We are minority shareholders. We are not on the board of BIFAB. But I think the point she makes and the point that was made by Councillor Mackay last week is one that's worth examining, because that decoupling may provide opportunities for jobs that have not been realised precisely because of the lack of investment and the lack of and the zero risk approach that the majority shareholder and the BIFAB board have taken to date.
Alistair Allen, followed by Donald Cameron.
Can I draw the Cabinet Secretary's attention to the Action for Arnish campaign, one of whose requests is that the Government and others consider potential uses for the yard at Arnish other than simply the BIFAB option. Can the Cabinet Secretary speak to that and offer any assurances to the Action for Arnish campaign about that point?
Fiona Hislop.
I share the member's desire to see the full potential of the strategic site Arnish achieved. As the minority shareholder, we're not involved in the operational management decisions relating to BIFAB. It would be a matter for BIFAB as the leaseholder to take decisions on future utilisation of the site. However, we will continue to press the majority shareholder for its plan for the future, and that plan may include allowing the Arnish yard to be used in other ways, or in relation to my answer previously, look at the lease for Arnish. It may have potential, and that's why I think we should look at all options and explore all options to be better used in a different arrangement.
Donald Cameron, followed by Rona Mackay.
Thank you. On the issue the Cabinet Secretary has just mentioned, can she confirm what discussions the Scottish Government has had with JV Driver about its long-term plans for the Arnish site on Lewis, given that the workforce there remain deeply concerned about their future and indeed will be even more anxious after today's news?
Fiona Hislop.
Well, that's exactly the point we've been pressing JV Driver on. The plans for the yards, the plans for the business, and indeed as far back as the summer, I was impressing on them the importance for them to set out what their long-term plans were, what their immediate issues were in relation to sea green and LNG in particular. But the point he's raising is exactly the point that we need from the company, is their commitment to these sites. If that is not forthcoming, then I think it is important that we do look at other options.
Rona Mackay, followed by Alex Rowley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary expand on what levers currently rest with Westminster that, if devolved, the Scottish Government would use to support the sector?
Fiona Hislop.
Well, there are three clearly obvious areas where the UK Government could change their position, or if they were devolved to Scotland, we could use them. The first is in relation to the auctions themselves, and indeed the question previously from Mark Ruskell indicated that where we have that capability, where there has been powers devolved, for future leases that are coming up in Scotland, we can secure those jobs guarantee aspects that people are concerned about. The other area is in relation to cost of development and also cost of transmission. And it's absolutely outrageous that it costs more to develop and transmit from the North Sea than it does to other areas that are closer to the south of England. So these are obvious areas. These are areas I have already and continuously raised with the UK Government in my discussions, regular discussions with Minister Zahawi. I've said to him if he wants to ensure that UK Government can realise their climate change commitments, they will have to change the position. It's not just about investment and monies, that's one thing, but it's also about policy and regulation. And there are levers and powers that the UK Government can use. And indeed, in the joint working that I've agreed to do with Michael Gove in my conversation this morning, those aspects of regulation, policy, as well as investment should be on the table for exploration.
Alex Rowley, followed by Ruth Maguire.
Presiding Officer, I believe the decision that has been made by ministers is the wrong decision. They say that their judgment was based on the legal advice that they got. Therefore, I'm asking, surely it is in the public interest to publish the legal advice that you have based your judgment on. Where did that advice come from? Who commissioned that advice? And why on earth did it take till last week to be in contact with the UK Government when both governments should be working together here to bring jobs through the renewable sector to Scotland? Why wait till last week? Will you publish the legal advice?
Fiona Hislop.
So on the point about discussions with the UK Government, obviously the discussions in this last week have not been the only discussions we've had about investment in the offshore industry. It's not been the first time we've discussed issues around regulation and transmissions, as I've just said to Donald Cameron. And so therefore we have had regular discussions and we will continue to do so, and we will intensify those discussions. In relation to the advice and the legal advice, I have said repeatedly the Ministerial Code and the Scotland Act prevents us from issuing that legal advice. It is not in the public interest necessarily to do so. And of course he will remember, because the Labour government for many, many years adopted the same position, not just here as the Scottish Executive, but also at Westminster, apart from one time. And the one time that I recall that the Labour Party issued legal advice was on the Iraq War.
The final question is from Ruth Maguire.
Presiding Officer, can I ask what engagement the Scottish Government has had with affected workers and what support can be provided to them?
Fiona Hislop.
Well, when the majority shareholder and the board agreed for us to do so, we've engaged actively and will continue to do so with the trades unions. We have relayed to BIFAB themselves that they should be actively engaged with the 30 current permanent members of the staff that are there, and we would ensure that they are recognised. And at the end of the day, and I think this is what brings all of the chamber together, it's the interest of the workforce and the constituents that represented by MSPs in this chamber that we should have a focus on, to make sure that they can have that just transition, as we've been talking about, to have confidence to retrain to do that as well from other sectors. And that is why I will work, and I do want to work collaboratively and cooperatively with members across this chamber to secure the long-term future, but also the short-term future and the potential that is still there to secure those LNG jobs.
That concludes questions on the ministerial statement and BIFAB, and we'll move on to the next item of business. Can I remind all members that social distancing measures are in place, so take care, please, when entering and leaving the chamber and across the Holyrood campus.